There's a certain kind of person who feels everything just a little bit closer to the surface. A song can break them. A memory can flood their eyes before they even realize it's happening. They cry at commercials, at strangers' kindness, at the way light hits someone's face when they smile. And the world often tells them they're too sensitive, too soft, too much. But what if that's not weakness at all? What if the ability to cry easily is actually a sign of something deeper, something most people have learned to bury? Because tears aren't just water and salt, they're a language. And people who cry easily are fluent in something the rest of us forgot how to speak. Most people think crying is about sadness, but for those who cry easily, tears are so much more complex than that. They cry when they're overwhelmed with beauty, when someone finally understands them, when they witness an act of unexpected grace. Their tears aren't always about pain. Sometimes they're about feeling too much life at once, like their heart can't quite hold all the emotion inside, so it spills over. Psychologically speaking, people who cry easily have what researchers call high emotional reactivity. Their nervous system responds intensely to stimuli, both positive and negative. It's not that they're broken or unstable, it's that they feel the full spectrum of human experience without filters. While others might experience emotions as background noise, these people experience them as symphonies, loud and unavoidable and deeply moving. This is linked to brain chemistry, specifically to how their limbic system processes emotion. The limbic system is like the emotional center of the brain, and in people who cry easily, it's more active, more responsive. Studies show they also tend to have higher levels of prolactin, the hormone that regulates emotional tears. So when we say someone is more emotional, we're not being metaphorical. Their biology is literally wired to feel more intensely. But here's what makes it complicated. Society teaches us that crying is childish, that strong people hold it in, that tears are embarrassing, inappropriate, a loss of control. So people who cry easily spend their whole lives apologizing for something they can't change. They learn to excuse themselves on rooms, to hide in bathrooms, to turn away so no one sees their eyes welling up. And that shame, that constant feeling of being too much, becomes its own kind of pain. Because crying easily isn't a choice, it's a trait, like having blue eyes or being left-handed. You can't train yourself out of it any more than you can train yourself to stop feeling hungry. The tears come whether you want them to or not. A kind word from a stranger, a scene in a movie where someone finally says what they've been holding in, the memory of someone you lost, and suddenly you're crying and you don't even know exactly why, just that something touched the part of you that's always tender. There's a concept in psychology called sensory processing sensitivity. People with this trait don't just feel their own emotions deeply, they absorb the emotions around them. They can walk into a room and sense tension no one has spoken about. They can hear pain in someone's voice, even when they're smiling. They pick up on subtleties that others miss, micro-expressions, shifts in energy, the unsaid weight of things. And all of that input, all of that emotional data, it builds up, and sometimes the only release is tears. You'll often find people who cry easily feeling like they're living without skin. Everything touches them directly. A harsh word can wound them for days. A moment of tenderness can restore their faith in humanity. They don't experience life in a mild, controlled way. They experience it raw and unfiltered, and that takes a toll. Because when you feel everything, you can't numb yourself selectively. You can't just turn off the sad and keep the joy. It's all or nothing. This is why people who cry easily are often deeply empathetic. They don't just sympathize with others' pain, they feel it as if it's their own. When someone they love is hurting, their heart breaks too. When they see injustice, it moves through them like a physical ache. They can't watch suffering and remain detached. Their tears are proof that they care, that they're connected to the world in a way that refuses to look away. But that empathy can be exhausting because the world is full of pain, and when you feel all of it, when you can't harden yourself against it, life becomes overwhelmingly heavy. They cry for people they've never met, for animals in distress, for stories that happened years ago but still feel present. Their tears aren't just about their own life, they're about life itself, about how fragile and precious it all is. There's also something fascinating about how people who cry easily process memory. Psychologists have found that emotional intensity strengthens memory encoding. So when people remember something, they don't just recall the facts, they recall exactly how it felt, the temperature of the room, the sound of someone's voice, the specific ache in their chest. And those memories can trigger tears years later, as if time hasn't dulled the feeling at all. That's why nostalgia hits them so hard. A song from their childhood can bring them to tears, not because they're sad, but because they're feeling the entire weight of time passing, the innocence they used to have, the people they've become, the versions of themselves they'll never be again. It's not grief in the traditional sense, it's the bittersweet awareness that everything beautiful is also temporary. And here's the paradox. The same sensitivity that makes them cry also makes them incredibly resilient, because people who cry easily don't bottle things up. They don't let emotions fester into something toxic. Their tears are a release valve, a way of processing pain in real time instead of carrying it for years. Research shows emotional crying actually reduces stress hormones in the body. It's healing. It's how they stay soft in a hard world. People often mistake their tears for fragility, but crying easily doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're brave enough to feel. In a culture that tells us to suppress, to smile through pain, to never let them see you break, people who cry easily are doing something radical. They're being honest, they're refusing to pretend, and that takes courage most people don't have. Think about the people in your life who cry easily. They're the ones who will sit with you in your darkest moments and not try to fix you. They're the ones who notice when you're hurting, even when you're hiding it. They're the ones whose kindness feels genuine because it comes from a place of real understanding. Their sensitivity isn't a flaw, it's a gift they give to everyone around them. But the hardest part for people who cry easily is learning to be gentle with themselves, to stop apologizing for their tears, to stop seeing their emotions as something to control or suppress. Because the truth is, crying isn't the problem. The problem is a world that's forgotten how to make space for feeling, how to honor the fact that some people are simply built to experience life at a deeper frequency. If you cry easily, you already know what it's like to feel misunderstood, to be told you're overreacting when you're just reacting, to wonder if there's something wrong with you because everyone else seems fine and you're falling apart over something small. But nothing about you is wrong. You're not broken, you're not too much. You're just awake to the emotional reality of being human in a way that others have learned to numb. Your tears are not a weakness. They're proof that you're still connected, that beauty still moves you, that injustice still matters, that love still feels like something worth breaking for. In a world that's constantly trying to make us harder, colder, more controlled, you've remained soft, and that's not something to apologize for. That's something to protect. Because people who cry easily remind the rest of us what it means to be fully alive, that vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength, that feeling deeply is not the same as being fragile, that tears, in all their messy, inconvenient honesty, are one of the most human things we do. So if you're someone who cries at everything, who feels too much, whose eyes betray you before your words can catch up, know this: the world needs people like you, people who haven't forgotten how to feel, people who see the beauty in small things and the tragedy in big ones, people whose hearts are still tender enough to break. You might not fit the mold of what society calls strong, but you're strong in ways that matter more. You're strong enough to feel and still keep going, strong enough to cry and still show up, strong enough to be vulnerable in a world that rewards walls. And maybe that's the real psychology of people who cry easily. Not that they feel too much, but that they feel exactly the right amount, the amount we're all supposed to feel before we learn to shut it down, before we built armor, before we decided that being human meant hiding the most human parts of ourselves. So let the tears come. They're not your enemy, they're your truth. And in a world full of masks and pretending, your tears are the most honest thing about you. Don't dim that. Don't shrink it. The world doesn't need more people who've learned to stop crying. It needs more people who've remembered why tears matter. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more conversations about the deeper parts of being human, like and subscribe, because we're just getting started.